those that know my wife, okay, when we go on vacation, she is a planner. I mean, she is a planner. When we go wherever it is, whatever hotel we're staying at, she knows how many coffee shops are around there. She knows what restaurants are around there. We're on the way. She's telling me, oh, we can eat here one night. And I'm like, can we just get there first, you know? But she knows everything about that area that we're going to. And then she keeps us on the ball. We know what we're going to do. You know, and I was thinking, you know, why aren't we that concerned about heaven? You know, this, what I'm going to share with y'all tonight, this should bring joy to your heart and a smile to your face, because we're going to be talking about heaven. And as a Christian, I mean, that's what we have to look forward to. That's why we're Christians. I mean, if there was no heaven, what are we doing? You know, so, you know, that's just I don't think we talk enough and people don't preach enough about heaven, because I think that's something that should excite us, something that should get us going. You know, it's good to wake up in the morning and know there's a heaven out there and that we're children of God and we're going to go there. You know, years ago, I had a friend, Robert Dobbs. Some of y'all might know him. I always called him Doug Dobbs back then. Then a lot of people at work called him Robert Dobbs, but Doug Dobbs is how I knew him. And he was a friend of mine. Played basketball together for years, went to church with him for years, just a good, godly man. And he had a son. His oldest boy died in a car wreck, Brett Dobbs. And I remember going over to Doug's house about a month later, and we would sit on the porch, and I'd go by there and check on him and talk to him and Charlene. And he had this book. And I said, "What you reading?" He said, "I'm reading about heaven." He said, "Because I want to know what my son's doing. I want to know what he's looking at. I want to know what he sees." You know, and I said, "That's a good thing. That's a good thing." And now Doug has passed away, and he's with Brett in heaven. So they're experiencing it together. You know, and also I went by and seen Brother Rudy yesterday. Went by and saw him last week, but went by and saw him yesterday. And, you know, one thing he told me and boy, I was like, boy, it confirmed what I was going to talk about tonight, by the way. He said, "I know I'm coming, and you need to pray for Brother Rudy." And he said, "Don't pray for a healing." He told me that, by the way. He said, "Don't pray for a healing. Pray that God will give me courage to face what I've got to face." Because he thinks it's going to be painful the last days that he has. But he's got cancer in 4 different places now, and he's just not doing well. But he said, "You know what?" He said, "I think I'm going to be surprised when I get to heaven." He said, "I think we're all going to be surprised when we get to heaven." He said, "Because I don't think we understand and know exactly what we've got coming." You know, and I'm glad he had that attitude, because we're going to be surprised, because I don't think any of us can fathom what heaven is like. But we're going to look at it tonight, and we're going to see what the Bible has to say about it. If you have your Bible or your phone or whatever, you can turn to John chapter 14, verses 2 and 3. And most of you know this verse by heart. Verses 2 and 3. It says, "Let not your heart be troubled." Well, I'm going to read verse 1 too, since we're there. "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions." Your Bible might say rooms or dwelling places, but many mansions. "If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you into myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." First thing we can get out of that verse, by the way, and I'm going to try to point out some of these things, is he says, "My Father's house." So I'm going to my Father's house. You know, I think that's a comforting thing. You know, when you start thinking about your family and you start thinking about your father or your grandfather or something, and going to that house, you know, at Christmas time or Thanksgiving or whatever, there's a comfort in being in that house and the family being together. And I think that's what Jesus is telling us there where he's going to the Father's house. It's just like he's going home, you know. And then he says, I'll go there, and he says that he's preparing a place for us. You know, he's been preparing a place for a while. And I can't imagine what it's going to look like. But you know something, I was asleep last night, and I woke up at 12:30 on the dot. And I was like, things started running through my mind. This verse started running through my mind. And something hit me that I had never really thought about before, is that Jesus, I can just imagine when he was a child, you know, what did his dad do? His earthly dad. He was a carpenter. So Jesus was raised around a carpenter. And I can just imagine Joseph building him a little room on the house, building Jesus a little room on the house. And I can imagine Joseph tucking him in one night and Jesus saying, you built me this little room, but I'm going to build you a mansion one day. You know, I can just picture that. And I think it's amazing that Jesus' earthly dad was a carpenter, and Jesus ended up being the master carpenter of heaven. I thought that was interesting. You know, I've done construction my whole life. Ever since I was 15, I've been in the construction world. You know, and I've seen some really, really nice houses. I've seen some people that have a lot of money can build some things that you cannot even comprehend. You know, I remember doing some marble for some people. There was 2 doctors that got married, and she was a brain surgeon and he was a heart surgeon. And they built a house over in Gulfport. And I remember going to this house, it's just huge. And you go in the front door, and there was this self-contained marble staircase that went up. It was just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. You know, they had ordered marble granite from China, and it had like this aqua color in it around their swimming pool. It was crazy. And they had this looked like a moat coming into the house, this little pond looking thing. And they bought a covered bridge from up in North Mississippi somewhere and hauled it down here and put that little bridge over this little moat so they could drive their car over into the garage. I mean, it was just amazing. But all that is going to fail in comparison to what Jesus is preparing for us. You know, I don't think we can comprehend. And if we could, I think we would really act different and treat people different than the way that we do if we really believed in where we're going. But I think we have a hard time doing that for some reason. You know, let's talk about where heaven is. In Acts 1:9, it says, and when he had spoken these things, hang on, let me get this one. And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. Up. You know, heaven's up. You know, Jesus ascended into the heavens. He went up. And in another verse, it talks about in 2 Corinthians, this is really loud, 2 Corinthians 12, verses 2 through 4, Paul talks about going up, that he had a vision and he went up, and it said he went up into the third heaven. You know, he went up into the third heaven. The first heaven is what we look at, is where the birds fly around and the clouds are. The second heaven is where the sun and the moon and the stars are. The third heaven is where heaven is. It's something that we can't see, but it's there. It's above all these things. And it's a place. It's not a figment of our imagination. It's not something that, you know, that when we die, we're just going to go in this zombie state and we're going to dream about heaven all these times. That's what some people believe. But it's a place that we're going to. It's a place that we're going to be at. You know, in Revelations chapter 21, verse 16, it talks about the dimensions of heaven and what heaven looks like. You know, it says heaven is 4 squared, and it's perfect. And it says it's 1,500 miles high and 1,500 miles wide, and that's the width and the length and everything is squared, 1,500 miles. And, you know, I've heard people say before, well, that don't seem very big. You know, how's all the Christians going to fit in there? It's just 1,500 miles. How are they going to fit in there? You know, from the beginning of Adam and Eve to now, there's been a lot of Christians. You know, how are we going to all fit in there? You know, if you take heaven and you put it like in floors and levels, if you went to the first level of 1,500 miles squared and you gave everybody a mansion that was 100 by 100, that's a 10,000 square foot house. Most of us don't have, some of y'all might have 10,000, I don't know. Y'all might have a 10,000 square foot house. I don't have a 10,000 square foot house. That's a big, big house. But say that we all had a mansion that was 10,000 square foot, and the ceilings on it were 15 feet high. It's a big place. Do you know on the bottom level of this city, you could hold over 6 billion people? 6 billion. If you gave them all 100 and 100 mansion. Going up, if you had a 15-foot high ceilings and you went up all the way to 1,500 feet, 1,500 miles, it takes 500,000 stories. That's how many levels you would have, 500,000. And just think you have 6 billion people could fit on one level. God's prepared a place everybody could fit. Everybody could fit. Could you imagine taking an elevator up? I'm going to go up 1 million, you know, I'm going to go up 500,000 flight stories here, you know. But I really believe we're going to have bodies, and the Bible tells us, like Jesus had. And if you remember, Jesus just appeared to the disciples, you know, scared them. I think we'll be able to move around like that. Don't know that for sure, but I think we kind of have a good illustration of how Jesus was when he was here. So I think we'll be able to go from the first floor to the 250,000th floor, just like that, you know, and go see somebody. But you know, when John's describing this, he also talks about it says it has 3 gates on each side of the city. There's 12 gates because there's 4 sides of the city. And he says that all the gates are like pearls. You know, I always, especially in Revelation, when John is talking about things, when John was seeing visions of all this stuff, especially like in talking about the end of times, I'm sure when John saw an airplane or something, he didn't know how to describe it. And he used the best of his ability, animals or locusts and stuff like that, to describe these things. You know, but when John's describing these gates and stuff, and he says it looks like a big pearl, you know, he just sees the things that are the most beautiful things to him, and he's using them as his examples. You know, it talks about the streets being like transparent gold, whatever that is. You know, but in your mind, when I said that, I guarantee you some visual picture coming into your mind of transparent gold. You know, it's amazing, you know, they're going to be filled in potholes in with gold dust. And then, you know, that's just what gold's worth up there. You know, it's just going to be an amazing place that it's hard for us to even comprehend. You know, I'm off my notes already. You know, it's hard to imagine the beauty because we haven't experienced and we can't experience anything like that here. You know, some of the most beautiful things that we see, you know, if we try to explain it, it's really hard to. You know, it's hard to go to the mountains and explain to somebody like a sunset or a sunrise because of the colors and the pictures, you know, and the trees, the color of the trees. It's hard to explain that stuff to someone. And John was trying to do this in Revelation when he was telling us about heaven, you know, because he only had so many things that he could use in describing how heaven was and what it looked like. And that's the same way we have a hard time, but it's going to be more beautiful than we could even imagine. And saying what it looks like, there's some things that are in heaven that's already there. There's things that are in heaven that's already there waiting on us. And one of those is God himself. Heaven is God's dwelling place. Now, God's everywhere and God can be everywhere, but he also has a dwelling place. Because Jesus said, my Father's house, so this is where God's throne is in heaven. And that's where he dwells. You know, it's kind of hard to understand that sometimes, but God is there. And it's a comfort to know that God is there. It's a comfort for us to know that God is there. I mean, we can't imagine God's love. We don't understand love like God does. Because you can't imagine him giving his only son to die for us and loving us that much. I mean, God loves us. Another thing that is there, another person that is there is Jesus. You know, Jesus said he ascended to heaven, and he said, I go to prepare a place. He's there, and he sits at the right hand of the Father. Jesus is there. And I don't know about you, but there's been a lot of songs written about somebody going to heaven and says, the first thing I want to do is see Jesus because he's the one that died for me. You know, I want to see Jesus. You know, and I got this feeling that he ain't going to look nothing like we think that he looks, you know. You know, this is a Hebrew boy, you know, and every picture I've ever seen has been a white, blue-eyed American, you know. So I don't know what exactly he's going to look like, but it's going to be a surprise to us all, just like Rudy Bowler said. It's going to be a surprise. But can you imagine seeing Jesus? Seeing somebody that actually died for you. That actually died for you. How many people has died for you? Well, Jesus did, and we'll get to see him. And that's something to look forward to. Another thing that's in heaven is people that has gone on before us. Our loved ones. Our husbands, wives, grandmas, grandpas, cousins, friends. And I can name every one of those because every one of those has passed away in my life. And just to think that when you get there, that they're there. And we will know them. It says you'll be known as you were known. You know, we'll know them. And it's just going to be a great thing. It's going to be a great reunion time. You know, I also think about that too, though, of people that are waiting on somebody to show up that don't show up. You know, that's got to be a very discouraging thing for people to think that their brother or their sister or their wife or their husband didn't make it. That's got to be very discouraging, a very awful time in heaven, really, that they did not make it. And it's one thing I want you to think about too. You know, the Bible tells us, you know, we always say there won't be no tears in heaven. What does the Bible actually say? It says God will wipe away all tears. So for him to wipe them away, that means there's got to be some tears there. And I think the thing that happens is that, because we always wonder, how can we enjoy heaven when we know somebody that we love is in hell? How can you enjoy heaven when you know somebody that you love is in hell? And when it says, and this is one of these doubting things because the Bible doesn't tell us everything, is that when it says he wipes away them tears, I really believe he wipes away the memories of those people. I mean, that's the only way you're going to enjoy heaven. And I really believe that's what happens. But anyway, I don't know that for sure. But another thing that is in heaven is our treasures. You know, in Matthew 6, let me turn there. Matthew 6, verses 19 and 20. It says, lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through and steal. Lay up things in heaven where they'll be safe. Lay up things in heavens that will last. And you might ask, well, what are those things? What are those things? How can we get treasures and lay them up in heaven? What is it? Can we UPS gold up to heaven? No, that it don't happen that way. What the treasures, and the Bible tells us there is so much. I could go on for hours talking about some of this stuff, but I condensed it about the different things that you can get treasures for. Just off the top though, is when you do things that is for Christ, when you do things that Jesus would do, when you do things that you don't take the glory for it, because if you take glory for it, you get your reward here on earth. And that's where your treasure is going to be, here on earth. But if you don't take credit for it and you give Jesus the credit for it, and you give God the credit for it, that's what you get treasures for helping the poor and not bragging about it, for using your talents that God's given you and giving God the glory for the talents that you have. When you give money to a poor person or a homeless person on the street, be sure and tell them that it's Jesus that lives in you that makes it able for you to give them this, and give Jesus the credit for it. And that's where you get your rewards in heaven, is things that you don't take credit for, but you give God the credit for it, and Jesus gets the credit for it and not you. And when Jesus is glorified by what you do, that's when you get these treasures. And the sad part about it is, I think we live in a world today that everybody wants to build up their treasures here. How much money can I get in the bank? How much money can I retire with? How nice can my house look? What about my boat? What about my car? What about my jewels? All these things. And I think we put way too much emphasis on that. And I think because we do, we are way too earthly minded. Have you ever heard anybody say, don't be too heavenly minded to be any earthly good? I don't believe that statement. I don't believe that. I think the more heavenly minded you are, the more earthly good you will do. Lay up treasures in heaven. Lay up treasures in heaven. And the last thing that is in heaven that I want to talk about is in Revelations 20, verse 15. And it says, and whoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Whoever was not found written in the book of life was cast in the lake of fire. Your name being in heaven is the most important thing that you'll have in heaven. Your name being there, because if your name is in the Lamb's book of life, that means you are going to heaven and you are going to get heaven. And no matter what, I think some other religions might teach that, well, they can erase your name, you can erase your name. I don't believe that. I believe when the blood writes it, it's there. And it'll be there for eternity. And that's what I believe. But, to think about our name as a Christian, if you're a Christian and you're here today, to think about that your name is written down in heaven. That your name, Brian Goldman, is written down. Believe that, Brian? Brian Goldman is written down in heaven, our names are there. And it's not like when you make a reservation at the Holiday Inn and you get there and they say, well, I don't know your name. You're not in the computer, even though it disappeared somehow or another. That's not the way heaven works. It's going to be there. If you're a Christian, God don't make mistakes. Don't have to worry about that. Well, what if they forget my name? God don't make those mistakes. Your name is there. If you're a Christian, your name is there. And I also, and this is another one of those things that in my mind I think about, because I was thinking about these mansions that we have in heaven as Christians. And I was thinking about not only our names being in this Lamb's Book of Life, but our names being on our mansion. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and I can just see other people that we know passing those mansions and go, he's got a mansion here. He'll be here shortly. Or she's got a mansion here. She'll be here shortly. You know, and that's something that I'm sure heaven is rejoicing over when they see our names written on our mansions. You know, and I think that's a great thing for us to be able to look forward to. But like I said earlier, what is a sad thing is I'm sure there's people that's looking for a name up there and they don't find it and they don't see it because they've never received a mansion. And my prayer tonight is that you have a mansion there and that you get to go to heaven one day and you get to see Jesus, you get to see God, you get to fellowship with the other Christians, and we all get to enjoy heaven together. Thank you.